Kia ora whānau, how's it going? Hey, it's Reo Waitangi here. My word on Monday for today, and just want to greet you all, he mihi tēnei ki a koutou, I mā takitaki ana ki te hōtaka nei, nō reira, tēnā koutou. Welcome to Word on Monday, and I just want to, for those that are watching that are not in New Zealand, just to let you know where we're at in our country today. This is a public holiday for New Zealanders. Yesterday we commemorated the 182nd day since the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi. And so this is, or yesterday was our national day, and today is the public holiday of that. The Treaty of Waitangi is one of two documents that were significant in New Zealand's history, and particularly for Maori. You had the Declaration of Independence, which was signed by Ngāpuhi chiefs as part of a confederation in 1835, where it's in its essence in the skirmishing of the European nations and America to seize lands and access rights to different lands. They set aside this document and signed it, declaring that New Zealand was an independent state and authority, and the chiefs of those that were part of the Confederation and any others that chose to join it, saying we are the authority over this lands. Then 5 years later came the Treaty of Waitangi. And so for a lot of New Zealanders, this is just a public holiday, but for many others, there is a historical referencing back and a memory where each generation needs to work out what that historical document means in our present time. And there are many documents that are written. You know, you've got Waitangi tribunal claims, you've got people that write many books, from Claudia Orange to others around that. You know, I've got a number of them sitting here, you know, Dr. Angi Walker and others that have taught over the years around the significance of the document, what do words mean in the document, things like sovereignty and kāwanakatanga, tino rangatiratanga, taonga, all these kupu have been debated about. Another time in our history which was sniffing around the treaty document was the Waitangi Act in 1975, where both the English version and the Maori text were put together. Even though the English version wasn't really signed by many Maori, it was put together under the sponsorship of Matio Rata. And a real heightened growth in honouring the treaty through the 70s and 80s, and you see land marches, Ngā Tamatoa rose up, on all ways to try to find people and our nation to honour the agreement and the pact and the covenant that was that was signed back by our tūpuna. And so we have a number of voices out there. There are voices of people that are in pain. There are voices where some are angry. There are voices where some don't give a toss of what's going on. It's just another day. Politically, you've got people on either spectrum where some want to fight for things, and others just say, "Oh, we're all one country. Let's just do it all together." And so, in the midst of our national day and a holiday and our maturity as a nation, you've got the spectrum of voices that are out there. And Now each generation has to understand and then work through how do we relate to each other. How do we build relationship in a nation where we've moved from Maori to European being part of the place, Pākehā, to where if you go in Auckland now, our largest city in New Zealand, you've got cultures from all over the world living in our largest city. How do we integrate people into a land? How do we integrate people into spaces where we can honour each other and how God has made them? And this is getting increasingly difficult when we have things like Gender 21 coming out of the United Nations, and there's this erosion particularly from the UN level, of national sovereignty and national identity, and a push for globalism. So we not only have historical threats, historical issues and grievances, and you know, there are tribes that have settled on agreements and accepted the terms of that, although there's still pain with it. And the big ones that come to mind is Tainui back in the 90s and Ngāi Tahu. And for some, that's done very well for them, but for others, they still, you know, our statistics are still terrible in relationship to suicide, imprisonment, education stats, health stats, and it's a situation that's not uncommon for a lot of Indigenous peoples across the world and across the world. So what does this have to do for us today in this segment? We are people where, particularly faith people, that we have to learn how to live in the world and those things around us. We have to be responsive to the needs of those. It's not enough to hear and watch or see people in our society through a glass bowl. It's not enough to be a tourist and just fly into these lovely places around our country and like a helicopter you pop in and do the tourism thing and then you pop out. It's not enough to be a faith people where you might go to church on Sunday and do your church thing, but there's no evidence of that faith working out in the relationships that you have. To me, the way that I've dealt with the treaty issues in space in myself, and it's just my own whakaaro, even though at times I might get frustrated or I could feel the mamai coming up, I've learned how to put it into proportion rather than allowing the emotion to take control. And that's by going, okay, in my sphere of influence and lens that I look into, instead of being the helicopter or the fishbowl, what can I physically do in my daily life that tries to reduce a particular issue? So rather than pointing a finger or being slanderous or just throwing out stuff against people or against the government or against is going to say, okay, what's the solution? What's a problem in front of me, and what's a solution that I can do? So we're active in doing things, and Joseph and I have been like that for all our lives. We've been actively doing things in our communities that God has put us into to try to help people either navigate their personal relationships at a higher level, or the organisations that we've been a part of, moving them from one position to a next position, and just allowing growth and development to come and a greater understanding. I remember studying this sort of and being aware of things, the land marches, and watching those as a kid, and um, thinking, man, you feel the mamai, but what can I do? And sometimes, the task, and I think the challenge for globalism is because we see things in a big picture, it can actually demoralize us, and can actually um, stop us from actually doing anything. So we're very good at throwing out our voice, but we don't bring a solution to the problem or to the context that we find ourselves. So what we've tried to do is find solutions that enable the intent of likes of the Treaty of Waitangi or Te Treaty of Waitangi, give practical applications, whether it's in our marriages, whether it's in our communities where we're working with, whether it's in organisations, and allowing all voices to be heard, allowing people to participate in ways that give mana to them, that allow people to see something from a different perspective. And it's a growing thing, and that's what we're trying to do here in Kaikui. We're trying to find solutions to those big problems that are going on, and we just find, okay, one or two that we look at. So food security, housing, marriages. What does it mean to see rangatiratanga, tino rangatiratanga in those areas for us as a community, for us as a hapu, for us as a whānau? What does it mean to have the ability to preserve our taonga? And in some of the contexts where we are, our taonga may be the ability to actually nurture the whenua in regards to our marakai. Our taonga might be able to realign ourselves to better life rhythms. So we consider the taonga of te maramataka and how that might help us in relationship to, okay, for example, what moon phase are we in? Is it full moon, new moon, whero, tangaroa, all these things, and that might help explain what's going on around me. If I'm feeling a little bit down, it might be, maybe we're in the low moon phase in the sense of the energy side of things, and so we can explain that, through this particular knowledge, our taonga, we can execute that. And so part of our maramataka, part of our kaitaki marakai, I think about that in relationship to our gardens. When is it the best time to sow things? When is it the best time to nurture the soil? And you take that principle and try to apply it to your life as well. And in our communities, what's something out there like the housing, education and health and so forth? How do we promote, if life is a taonga to us and it's guaranteed in the Treaty of Waitangi and it's guaranteed in scripture, how do we encourage healthy lifestyles? How do we encourage the betterment of things that produce life and life in its fullness into our lives? I've been looking at some of the posts that have been online and some of the responses, and it still saddens me on both sides of the spectrums of hearing where people, and it ends up being more about what they want to say, and doing so you shut off others. A verse that has helped me in times, and it's been more about a critique on myself, is Psalm 37, verses 3, where it's only a small verse and it's only part of a wider discussion, but this idea that the psalmist, King David, he says, trust the Lord and do good. Despite the confiscations of land, despite the breakdown of social structures, despite the loss of te reo. I'm a second language learner, and it's been a life journey of having to do, that's another example. If you've lost something or something's happened, what's your responsibility? What are you doing? Instead of blaming others, instead of pointing the finger, what are you doing to correct it? Are you being active in learning and growing and developing as a contribution back into that retaining your mana motuhake, retaining your tino ranga tiratanga, retaining your own kawanatanga over that. So trust God and do good. In the midst of the voices that are crying, in the midst of the variety of things that are happening in society, the competing voices that are out there, trust God and do good. Trust God that in the midst of suffering, that His presence is there. And God has said right back from the outset that He is here with us. There are many stories amongst our people of Maori knowing God, and then when the missionaries presented Jesus, they said, "Oh yeah, we know what you're talking about. We understand." There are many examples there throughout the land, and one of my books there is written by a guy that's talked about Maori slavery and how the gospel moved out into this land with the release of slaves. As I was talking to someone up here on Saturday, that actually there was something in the gospel that Maori responded to, that the Spirit of God touched Maori heart. And in the releasing of slaves from Ngāpuhi, we saw this move going back. Ngāpuhi had a change of, there's something that happened in them. There was a change in them, that this economic cycle, this economic process they had, they released them. They released these people. They released these slaves, and those slaves went out and touched their own people. So by the time missionaries came, a lot around the place, like down on the coast, and the Williams brothers went down. Māori were already doing faith things down at Rangiatea and Otaki, and they were already doing things across the nation, across our marae. So there's something there that God has done, and He's done a work in the past, and He'll do it again. He'll do things in our communities. Trust God. He'll do it. But the other part there is where to do good. Trust God and do good. And that is a hard thing, especially when the thing of evil is in front of you and you want to respond. Trust God and do good. So on our holiday, on our national day, in the midst of all the voices that are going on, whānau, in the midst of the challenges that face all of us, and particularly Māori and the Pākehā relationships at this time, and the relationships with all peoples in our society, trust God and do good. Trust God and allow Him to give you kingdom revelations to an earthly problem, a kingdom solution to an earthly problem. Be the answer, be the solution to an issue that's going on in your community, an issue that's going on in your whānau. Ask the Lord and trust Him. Say, Lord, help me to have a godly lens on this issue, and how am I to respond? How am I to miri the issue, the problem? How am I to massage it? How am I to offer a way where the love of God is expressed in our town, in the relationships I have, in the conversations I have today. Hoi anō whānau, it's a little bit of a different one, and may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face continually shine upon you. You are the head and not the tail. You're highly favoured of the Lord. And as the psalmist says, trust God and do good. Trust him, whānau. Our people need to trust him. Our whānaus need to trust him and do good. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. Kia ora matata.